Imagine being known as both the most terrifying and the most tender and compassionate being. That is the badass duality of Kali Maa, the Hindu goddess of death, destruction, motherhood, liberation. She says there is wisdom in facing what you avoid. Fear is often the doorway to freedom. The soul, unfortunately, cannot evolve without endings. Now, listen, to really understand her, her essence, her everything, the way that she deserves, I've got to give you some deets on Hinduism. Now, it is a very vast, beautiful, diverse religion. It would take hours to dive into the fullness of Hinduism, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, okay? By no means necessary, but I did do my due diligence. I did do my hours of research to understand the basic necessities, the foundations, because again, there are many interpretations, there are many facets, but just so you could understand the core essence so that we can really get into what Kali Maa wants to teach us today. All right, now some of our main characters, our main archetypes, our main beings that we need to understand, the foundational layer that we are laying here. You've got Shiva, consciousness, sometimes described as a passive male entity. Shiva is creation, preservation, dissolution, consciousness. And then you've got Shakti, energy, the dynamic, life-giving force behind all of creation. Also the supreme personification of the divine feminine. Now, without Shakti, consciousness cannot move, it cannot transform, right? Without energy, and without Shiva, energy has no awareness, no consciousness, right? Together, they create reality. Now, Shiva and Shakti, they take on many a form in Hinduism. They can be literal beings, literal deities. Kali herself is an expression of Shakti, of the divine feminine. She is the terrifying, fiercely loving force, divine feminine. All right, next we've got Vishnu, the protector. Vishnu is responsible for maintaining the cosmic order. Kind of an important job. Now, Vishnu, protector of the universe, Vishnu is a part of the Trimurti. Not a perfect pronunciation, but track with me here. The Trimurti, meaning three forms, three different expressions of the ultimate formless divine reality. This is known as Brahman, okay? Keep tracking with me. Now, the Trimurti we know has Vishnu, the protector, maintaining the cosmic order, the protection of everything. Then you've got Brahma, the creator, ultimate formless, infinite, supreme reality that pervades all of the universe. All right? Now, this I love. In Hinduism, the individual soul is not separate from this Brahma, the creator, that the soul is a part of that very same form. No separation. Side note, the inner soul, that inner beingness in Hinduism is called the Atman. All right, so you've got Brahma, the creator, you've got Vishnu, the protector. Third, and finally, you have Shiva, who we've talked a little bit about. In this particular group, Shiva is the destroyer. Shiva is in charge of destruction, which is not scary. It is necessary for the constructive transformation of everything. Now, last but certainly not least, when it comes to Hinduism, is the Devas and the Asuras. Now, in the context of Kali, this part is very important, so listen up. Now, the Devas, they're the celestial beings, the deities, the shining ones. They control various forces of nature and aspects of the cosmos as well. So like the sky, the sun, the wind, many, 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 many more things. They're also the protectors of Dharma, the cosmic order. They are the good. In the context of yin and yang type of a thing, they would be the light energy, the enlightenment of it all, the spiritual wisdom. Now the Asuras, on the other hand, they are demons, supernatural beings, chaos, ego, power. Funny enough, they are often seen as symbols of like the internal human struggle, the ego of it all. Now they're not inherently evil, just like your ego is not inherently evil. But in the context of Hinduism, and especially in this story of Kali, they are the anti-gods, okay? Now, Kali, like all of our favorite goddesses, has many an origin story, especially considering how many interpretations of Hinduism and their texts and teachings there are. But the most common begins with these devas and asuras. They was at war, honey. They were fighting. They'd been fighting for a while, and unfortunately, the asuras got the better of the devas. That's right. Now, naturally, for the cosmic order of things, this could not be. So the devas, they paid a visit to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. They explained the situation because, to my understanding, the asuras kind of cheated. From what I read, they usurped the power of the forces of nature, which, if we remember, the forces of nature is kind of the devas' job. That is what they kind of control. So, naturally, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they were mad. Their angry energy merged together to create one big angry face. And at the same time, a massive force of energy came together from the assembled bodies of the devas. And these two forces merged together and took the form of Kali. Yeah, needless to say, she dominated. She cried a loud cry and spread her entire beingness over all of the earth. It is literally said, and I quote, and I'm literally going to read it so I get it verbatim. The goddess drank from her wine goblet gifted to her from the gods and laughed as she made dust of the mountains that Mahishasura threw at her. She stepped on him, immobilized him, drove her spear into him. Yeah. She also, with every breath she took, manifested millions of female soldiers to help her. Badass. I mean, look at her. They never stood a chance against the literal terrifying embodiment of the divine feminine, especially considering every inch of her imagery, every inch of her physicality was blessed by the gods with an intention. The symbolism is not missing here, honey. For example, her black skin, black as in darkness, but not as in color, as in the void, the infinite from which we all stem. Pure consciousness beyond form. Her wild hair, untamed nature, how truth cannot be domesticated. Her naked body, how nothing is hidden, no ego. Remember, the Asuras literally is represented in the ego. Here comes Kali, made in the imagery of banishing ego. Now, she's got a lot of arms. 4 of them intentionally devoted to: 1 for destroying, 1 for liberating, 1 for blessing, 1 for removing fear. And then she's got some severed arms around her waist. Those arms represent action and karma. Now, Kali transcends karma. Now, the severed head, it is not necessarily celebrating violence the way one might hope. I got a little excited by that. I'm a believer that sometimes violence is the answer. In this case, it is more representing the false self, the ego identity, the mind that perceives itself to be separate. Now, the skulls around her neck, this part is cool. Each one is representing a Sanskrit letter. It's basically meaning all of language, all of creation. She's basically wearing all of reality around her neck. Now, her tongue, another very interesting, cool, vicious aspect that I love. It has many interpretations, but one in particular that I found interesting is that after defeating the demons, she was doing a cosmic dance. She got a little too excited. She was getting a little too powerful, so to speak. So Shiva laid beneath her just to kind of get her to calm down. And from my understanding, she accidentally stepped on him and she spit her tongue out kind of in shame, like, oh shit. But the interpretation, the symbolism behind it, and why it is still celebrated in the imagery really has more to do with the fact that she drinks ego before it can multiply. She basically consumes illusion. Now, her physical symbolism runs deep. Her lessons run deeper, honey. Yeah, Kali does not just come to you casually. She comes to you during divorce, grief, identity crisis, career collapse, when basically everything is falling apart and it feels like a punishment. Kali shows up to say, no, honey, I am making room. She is the goddess of shadow work, ego death, destroying false identities. She asks the question, who are you without the money, the titles, the performance, the mask? So much of Kali in her essence is death and destruction. She is the reminder that everything is temporary and will burn away. But what remains after that? Your soul. That's the part she cares about. And that's why most people don't meet Kali when life is peaceful. They meet her when they've ignored every other sign, when they've stayed too long in unhealthy situations, when an old identity refuses to die, when the gentle lessons didn't create the change that was necessary, when it is divine intervention, emergency life surgery that is needed. It's funny because in contrast with this very dark night of the soul energy that her appearance in your life can bring, her like regular devotees, the people that worship her like religiously, describe her energy to be this very soft, tender, maternal energy. The mom you laugh with and cry with, the mama bear energy, the one that swoops in situations when the baby cub has been hurt. Notice how in her origin story, she did not start that war. It was when all other methods failed that she stepped in and said, don't worry, I've got this. She's also depicted often dwelling in like crematories, always, always around death. Cemeteries. She is the constant reminder that everyone is equal. Everyone is equal. Everybody dies. Nobody is special. She is completely uninterested in who you pretend to be. She wants the soul beneath the costume. You know, she's often depicted laughing wildly, just throwing her head back in laughter. And this is so sassy. She does this because she's laughing. Like, imagine spending your entire life worrying about things that disappear. Money, power, beauty, control. Literally laughing at how seriously we cling to very temporary things. She says, you were never those things to begin with, babe. She is not attached to your comfort. She is devoted to your freedom, to your liberation, to your truth. Think about it this way. You know that moment when a child goes to reach for a burning stove and the mother swats the hand away? To the child, they might be scared in the moment. It might feel like punishment. But the mother is just saving the child. That is the energy. That is what we are talking about here. Her love is not measured by how safe it feels in the moment, but by how completely it liberates you by the end. Sometimes what feels like destruction from the ego's perspective to the soul is actually a profound act of grace. You know, she came to me very surprisingly, Kali. I was not expecting her energy. The more that I read about her, her lessons, her story, her purpose when she shows up in your life, the more it makes sense that I might sit here, and I love to research and learn, but at the same time, the presence of these deities I need. You know, to be honest, I've gotten really comfortable with the energies of transformation and destruction, so to speak, in my life. I would say probably a little bit too comfortable. Like today, life was lifing. This study and learning about Kali could not have come at a better time, which I don't think is coincidence. I did not plan to learn about her. She just randomly popped up on a page. My ear just started ringing when I said that. I would say that a dark night of the soul is not something that I am unfamiliar with, but it's interesting to witness how much deeper that shit can go. You know what I mean? Like, heavy on the what feels like destruction from the ego's perspective is exactly what the soul needs. Every time I feel like I've shed a layer of my ego or come to understand a layer of my ego deeper, there's another layer. That's the constant flow of transformation, right? But the ego can show up in so many different ways. Kali is said to remove what you're convinced you need, only for you to later understand why. And I feel like my life has been a long series of things being removed, and I'm not quite yet at the point of understanding why. And to be honest, it has thrown me into a bit of an identity crisis. I am sitting in a space where I feel like I know myself deeper than I ever have, And at the same time, I feel like I'm less secure in an identity. Does that make sense? Than I've ever been, you know? And I guess at the same time, that's a good thing because identity is always changing. Our identification with self or an attachment to personality can sometimes be a dangerous thing because we are constantly evolving individuals. And that can often quickly become patterns of behavior that become things that we have to unlearn eventually. You know what I mean? And at the same time, there is a core essence that you explore when you let go of the parts of you that you think are you. For me, there's been a common thread of self doubt that I disguise as limitations in a moment that don't exist. Here I am literally studying goddesses that represent this all knowing, all powerful feminine essence, this creator essence, this ability to transform and empower, excited to share the truths and lessons that these deities genuinely teach me. And I have the audacity to doubt my capacity. That is where the ego creeps in my life. And I am grateful for these opportunities to study powerful goddesses like Kali Maa, who teaches you very, very valuable lessons about the necessity of endings for the purpose of transformation. That when things feel like they are falling away, good. She says, no, I am making room. My life right now feels vast and empty and open. And at the same time, does that not also mean infinite space for more to be born? That is the duality, and that is the part that I can focus on. That is the part that you eventually get to after you allow for the destruction. Kali teaches many, many lessons. Every single one of them so fucking necessary right now. Everything that is false must die. And thank God, thank God. Are we not witnessing that? Just in life, in earth, in the collective right now, false structures must die. That change is sacred. Don't be scared of it. That fear is often the doorway to your freedom. And this one I particularly love as someone that has never gone a day without experiencing anxiety. I heard a quote one time that said, anxious people have the capacity to be the happiest. So letting your fear be the doorway to your freedom, letting it guide you to the thing that would actually liberate you. Your ego is not your identity. Your identity is constantly changing. Surrender creates liberation. Sometimes these points in our lives that feel like everything is collapsing and you're desperate to find something to grip on is the moment that is begging for you to find something divine to grip on. A realization that this is a collaborative effort, that you are not alone in the development of this transformation, that there are beings that are handling the cosmic order of things, that your job is to release, to let go, and allow. That sometimes love looks like destruction, and not in that toxic way, in that collapsing, to make room for what is reciprocal for your love essence. That your soul cannot evolve without endings. Endings are a good thing. That means a beginning is coming afterwards. And there is wisdom in facing what you avoid, my love. That sometimes the very thing that you are scared of diving deep into is the very thing that will liberate you into the next space, into the world that you deserve to explore. I don't know. I don't know, friend. But thank God for Kali and all of the goddesses like her. Go be terrifying and tender and powerful, my love. I love you, and I love me, and I love us, and I love all of this.